You ever stop and think about our schools? I mean, a lot of them were basically designed for the factory age. But are they really getting kids ready for a world full of AI where everything is constantly changing? Well, today we're going to talk about the one skill that might just be the key: self-regulation. So let's get into it.
So here's the plan. We're going to start with the big picture, why this is so important right now. Then we'll get crystal clear on what self-regulation actually is. And after that, we're jumping into the practical stuff. How to build independent learners, why feedback is so crucial, and even some tools that can help pull it all together.
All right, first up, the changing world. To really get why self-regulation is such a game changer, we kind of have to look back at the world our schools were originally built for and then see just how different things are today. Think about it, right? The school system that most of us went through, it was actually an amazing piece of industrial age design. Its job was to create a reliable, standardized workforce for a world that was pretty predictable. But that's just not the world we're in anymore, is it? Today's world is messy, it's all connected, and it requires a totally different playbook.
Yeah, the old way was all about memorization, right? Just cramming facts into students' heads and hoping they could spit them back out for the test. But these days, information is everywhere. You can Google anything. What's really valuable now is being able to see connections, to learn on your own, and to actually, run with a project without someone giving you a step-by-step guide.
So the whole point has changed. It's not about just training employees for a specific job anymore. It's more like we're trying to develop architects, people who can actually design their own careers, create their own solutions, and look at feedback as like fuel for getting better, not as a sign they messed up. Okay, so that's the why this is also important. Now let's get to the what. What in the world is self-regulation? I mean, we keep saying the words, but what does it actually look like when a student is doing it?
Okay, here's a great way to think about it. A self-regulated learner is like the captain of their own ship. See, they're not just a passenger along for the ride. Nope, they are at the wheel, setting the course, checking the conditions, and making adjustments to get where they need to go. They literally own the entire journey. And what this means, of course, is that the teacher's role has to change too. It's way less about being the sage on the stage with all the answers, and a lot more about being a guide on the side. Someone who designs the challenges that push students to build these skills for themselves. All right, this is all great in theory, right? But how do you actually do it in a real classroom? Let's break it down. We're going to look at some of the key ingredients for designing learning that really, truly builds independence. So the first thing, and this is a big one, is time. The activity has to be long-term. Think about it. You can't learn to manage a big project if the whole thing is over and done with in 45 minutes. Real self-regulation, that takes time. It needs a longer runway so students can actually make a plan, see how it goes, run into problems, and figure out how to fix them. So for example, asking a student to write down what they eat for 2 days, that's just a simple task. But asking them to keep a nutrition journal for a whole week? Well, now, that's a project. It means they have to plan ahead, be consistent, think about what they're doing. That is self-regulation right there. And this brings up a really important point. Who's in charge of the plan? If the teacher lays out every single step, like a recipe, then the student is just following instructions. But what if the students have to come up with the recipe themselves, figure out their own deadlines, decide who does what? Then they're not just cooks, they become chefs. They're learning how to manage a project, and they feel a real sense of ownership over what they create. All right, so we've got a long-term project. The students have made their own plan. Awesome. But how do they know if they're on the right track? Well, they need a kind of GPS to guide them. And in learning, that GPS is feedback. And this is a totally different way of thinking about feedback. It's not about grading what's already done. It's about building a bridge to what's next. It's the thing that shows a student, okay, here's where you are, and here's the goal. And then it gives them the first couple of steps to get there. And this is where we have to be clear about the difference between just praise and actual feedback. Saying good job feels nice, but it's kind of a dead end. It doesn't tell you what to do next. Real feedback, on the other hand, is like a roadmap. It tells you exactly what you did well and gives you clear directions on where to go from here. But here's the thing. Feedback is totally useless if you don't get a chance to use it. So you have to build in an opportunity for revision. When you do that, you create this amazing learning loop. They create something, they get feedback on it, and then they make it better. That's it. That's where the real learning kicks in. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Building these kinds of learning experiences sounds complicated. But the good news is we've got technology that can really help support this whole process and make it easier for everybody. Let's take a look. The right digital tools can act like a framework or scaffolding for these bigger projects. They can be that one central place where the plan lives, where you can track how things are going, and where everyone can work together. It basically takes this abstract idea of self-regulation and makes it something you can actually see and manage. I mean, just think about how these tools can support that whole cycle we talked about. You can use something like a digital notebook to share the goals and the success criteria right at the start. Then you have platforms that make that feedback loop super easy. And of course, task managers help students break down a giant project into smaller, doable steps. It puts them in control. Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. How do you actually start doing this? We're going to boil it all down to a super simple checklist you can use next time you're planning a project. Here it is. Think of this as your design filter. The next time you're planning something for your students, just run it through these 3 questions. 1, is it long-term with clear goals? 2, do the students get to plan their own work? And 3, is there a real opportunity to revise based on feedback? Every time you can answer yes to one of these, you're taking a huge step toward building real independence. And listen, this doesn't have to be some massive overhaul of your entire curriculum. It's really just about one small, intentional change. So take a look at the stuff you already have planned. Which project or assignment could you tweak just a little? Which one could be your first experiment? Because by changing just one activity to give students a little more control, you're doing more than just changing a lesson. You're starting to build the exact kind of creative, independent thinkers our future needs. So the question is, what's your first step going to be?